Hi, the date is August 21st, 2026, and my environment did not make me a good person, and had me develop traits of someone who could become a bad person. And that's just a fact. You know, my environment wasn't the most amazing growing up, or especially in my formative years. And especially my father, who is my biological father. I've got a stepfather now, he's great, but I had a biological father who was not a good man. And I developed traits, and those traits became who I was that were not traits of a good person. And so, starting off with those traits, you have the ability to disconnect your emotions from your actions. Whereas when I was younger, I would sometimes be put in positions where I did not have the emotional capacity to do something, but I was still, like, chores, for example. I would be bullied at school, have a really hard time, and then I'd come back and have to do chores, and I didn't have the emotional capacity. And that's a very tame example, but I had to disconnect how I was feeling and all the anger inside of me and still take the actions I needed to take. So whereas all that anger and all those emotions, as I would disconnect them, I would push them back into a fantasy world in my head, and kind of maladaptive daydreaming form of feeling my emotions, which I've made videos on how that has affected me at this age, and I have to learn how to actually feel my emotions in the real world now and not just rely on a fantasy world to process those. And this is obviously not a good trait, because to actually be a good person and experience the world and have a good life, you want to actually feel your emotions. But when you're doing stuff that isn't good, obviously, it's a helpful thing to be able to disconnect your emotions and just take an action. And then the second thing is something that developed a little bit past those formative years, and I don't really know the complete origins of it, but it's the ability to translate between power and morality, which is the ability to make direct decisions that turn a lack of morality and a lack of doing the right thing into money, which is more common than you think. But for my experience specifically in my life, where I would just go around and do, like, start a business or something, those things came so naturally to me that I would actively have to choose not to do them so as to keep my morality, which is something that, I mean, you take a kid who, these are traits that this kid has based on his environment, and then you tell him these are really bad traits. So I didn't do them, but they were still a part of me. And that ended up leading to a lot of my self-hate in the future, where there's these parts of me that are just parts of me. You know, they're not good or bad. They are usually traits that bad people have, and I would push them down, and then that was what my self-hate stemmed from. And then, I mean, you take a person who can disconnect from their emotions and take actions, and also has the natural ability to not have any morality and not follow their moral compass, and translate that into power and money, and that can be a really harmful person. And then that person has ambition and perspective that makes them a million times worse. You know, you have someone who has perspective to have ambition for money, and then they can use those two traits to make a lot of money. But where the real damage comes in is when you find someone, usually, or I guess stereotypically around the upper middle class area with those traits, and they don't just want money because they've seen money, and they know that money is just a representation of power. So a person with these traits will go for power, and that's how you get really bad leaders and even politicians in that, is with these traits, they rise to power, and then they use it to their advantage, and they end up hurting a lot of people. And this is something I've wanted to talk about for a while, but you can't really just turn on a camera and say, guess what, I'm a bad person. But I was thinking about it, and I realized I'm not actually a bad person. I just have traits of a bad person, where I have not done anything to cause people actual harm before, or use these traits to cause people harm. I am just someone with these traits. And I think one of the reasons I haven't done that before is because as a kid, everyone would tell me, these are bad things. And they would tell all my peers the same thing. But my peers, they were just like, okay, cool, this is great. Bad things, okay. And it didn't apply to them because they didn't have these things. These things weren't a part of who they were. But when it came to me, I was like, oh crap, they're talking about me. So I learned to be ashamed of that part of myself and kind of push it down. And that's where a lot of my self-hate came from. It wasn't just out of the blue. I didn't just hate myself and have low self-worth. I had qualities that I thought were genuinely bad. And that caused a lot of difficulty in high school too, because other people could see I was hiding something. They could see I was ashamed of something. And so they would shame me too. And that's where a lot of the bullying came from, and a lot of the other stuff. And it caused a lot of damage. And so I'm at the point in my life where I have to take responsibility for who I am and who I'm gonna be. And it's not easy, because now I'm in for example, feeling my emotions. There are very specific times I feel my emotions in my head and in my fantasy world and through maladaptive daydreaming, and to feel those emotions in real life is not easy. It's very rare occurrences, and it's gotten to the point where I have to, put my music up really loud and drive really fast to the point of feeling any emotion in the real world. And you can't really live like that. So I've gotten to the point where you have to decide who you're gonna be. You can't just be nothing. You gotta decide on something. And I have been nothing up to this point, because I thought it's better to be nothing than to be a bad person. And genuinely a bad person. And so that's what I've been up to this point. And now it's getting in a direction that I actually have to make decisions to live. I actually have to make decisions in the real world, and I have to be someone. I can't just be no one. I can't just live with my parents forever and numb my brain and avoid myself and just hate myself forever. I have to become someone. So I either have to follow that direction of being a bad person and follow those traits that was instilled in me from my environment from a really young age, or the alternative, which is what I'm going to be focusing on. And one of the reasons why I made this video is because someone in this position, I know how you feel, and it's horrible, because you feel like something's wrong with you. And I'm not saying there is, but you have the potential to do a lot of harm, and you probably feel ashamed about it. So the direction I'm going in, if who I am is based on things I've done over and over again in the past, that they become, or traits I've developed over and over again in the past, based on my environment, based on what I do, based on my thoughts and my actions, then however these traits developed, however who I am developed, I can take a new path on who I want to be. I don't have to go on the path that was set out for me by my childhood environment, which is obviously not a very good one, as I've explained. I can find a new path or build a new path. I don't think, or I guess you do find yourself or find out who you are, but when I found out who I was, that was not a good experience because I was not a good person and I didn't like myself. So instead of finding who you are, it's about building who you are. So now I take consistent action, and I'm going to take consistent action. I'm going to build a routine around who I want to be, and repetition of taking the actions of what a good person would take. And then that becomes habit, and I do that over and over again, and I develop traits of a good person, and then that habit gets formed into who I am as a person. It becomes my thoughts and my actions, and it just becomes natural. So like your environment might have shaped you before, your environment can shape you again. And when you were a kid, you didn't get to choose your environment. So if it shaped you into a bad person, it shaped you into a bad person. But now that you're an adult, it's a very important part because you can either, you might have been shaped into a bad person, but you can choose if you want to be a bad person. You can also choose if you want to be someone else, if you want to build a habit that develops into a natural trait of who you are. And so that's what I'm doing. And I hope to document this a little bit and make more videos talking about the direction and who I'm building myself into. Because another good thing, one of the harder things about this is putting this into the public view is not easy, because it's like I'm just putting this all out here, that some of the deepest parts of myself, which is actually a lot easier to do because I don't feel very much emotion of like kind of the embarrassment of putting this out because I've kind of disconnected from my emotions. So it makes it a bit easier to just say all this stuff. And that's why I can talk about wanting to end my life while keeping a straight face like this in some of my videos, is because I'm not connected with the emotions, you know? But if you could see the fantasy and the maladaptive daydream in my head, then you would kind of see like, wow, there's all the emotions, and that's why he wants to take his life. That was in the past, though. I don't want to take my life anymore, or I don't obsess over the idea of taking my life. It's like when I'm driving really fast, listening to really loud music, and I'm like just putting my foot as hard as I can on the gas, and I'm just going faster and faster and faster. It gets to the point where I'm feeling emotion, and then I have this urge to just keep driving, to just not take my foot off the gas, and to end my life at that point of feeling that emotion. End that point, end my life actually living my life for once. Obviously, I've never like really gone that far, but it has gotten close. And I don't want that to be my way of feeling emotion, or I don't want to romanticize dying. So again, it's not easy, or it's not, there's disadvantages of putting this out on the internet, but I'd say one of the good things is I haven't really, I wouldn't say acted on these traits, but I've never really caused real harm by acting on these traits. So also, when you're starting over and you're building yourself again from zero by building habits into natural traits of who you are, I'm starting from zero here. Or I guess a little bit in the wrong direction, but pretty much zero. And so it's good because I can make videos on this and I can document starting from zero, or starting from a place where I don't like, where I hate myself and I hate who I am, because let's be honest, I've explained who I am, and it's not good, right? It's not a good thing. And that's just a fact. And it makes me really understand how I've struggled with self-hate for so long. But I'm at this baseline of hating myself and not liking who I am, and now I have to build a new me, and doing that on camera and documenting the process a little bit, I think can bring a lot of value to other people. And whereas these traits inside of me had the potential to cause me and the world around me a lot of harm, now flipping that around, other people who have these traits and are, you know, they're scared, and it's shameful and embarrassing. Like there's no real way around it. You can't just go to people and say, I'm you know, like, I'm a bad person, or I have traits that a bad person would have, you know? And it's hard to seek help for that. But maybe with these videos, someone will see that it's not your fault how your environment has shaped you. It is your fault if you choose to stay in that, you know? And I hope this video can help some people who are like that, because it's not nice, and it develops into a lot of self-hate, and it's very different than a lot of people. So you'll grow up with normal people, and you'll be surrounded by normal people, and it's just like, well, you're just different, and you know you're different, and you can't tell people you're different, and you're just different. But flip that around, I know a lot of people that, I don't want to say they're not smart people, but I don't know if they're good people either. Like, I look at them and I think if they had some of these traits, they would definitely use that to make a lot of money and take advantage of a lot of people. Now you get to build yourself, and you get to actively choose to be a good person. I mean, some people's environment shapes them into a good person because they had a certain upbringing or a certain youthful environment, but now you get to actively choose to be a good person. And I feel like that means so much more. And I try to integrate that so much into my channel. I try to focus on morality and the moral philosophy of having a channel, and not advertising things, and not taking advantage of viewers, and not everything like that. And it's good. And my first advice of putting this into practicality in the real world, you know, putting this into action, would be treat yourself like zero. Or that sounds bad. Treat yourself like you're a baby. You don't know what being a good person is, but you want to learn. Read the self-help books, read the moral philosophy, read and understand what it means to be a good person, and then it will help you to actually be that. And that's what I'm integrating. You know, I'm integrating discipline, the skill of discipline, and then I'm also integrating reading books, moral philosophy, taking care of myself, and doing healthy things that also build good values in the person I want to be. And yeah, so probably one of the most, I don't even know what to call this video, but it's very eye-opening. And it feels good to say it out loud, because to hold all that in for so long was not easy. And it sucks, you know? And I hope this helps people. But yeah, that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching. See you guys. Oh, damn, it's a long video. See you guys.